Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're actually bypassing the usual daily news cycle because we are diving straight into a grand, centuries-old ambition that is suddenly making massive headlines again. So, recently, Russia's deputy prime minister put forward this highly ambitious proposal. The idea? To build a direct railway linking Moscow all the way to India. But to truly understand the sheer scale of this, this Moscow to India railway, we have to look way past the steel and the tracks. We really have to look at history. Because what we're talking about here is a massive geopolitical puzzle that's been sitting unsolved for generations.
Okay, let's dive into this. Take a look at this declassified 1979 CIA document. It actually proves this railway isn't just some new, impromptu idea that popped up overnight. Western intelligence has known for decades that Moscow, literally going back to the days of the USSR, has relentlessly sought access to the Persian Gulf. Why? To secure warm water ports and finally reach the Indian Ocean. What I found absolutely fascinating here is that this train proposal is actually the modern revival of a very, very long-standing geopolitical quest.
And this quest goes back even further than the Cold War. Look at this quote from a 1980 publication called The Great Game in Asia. It highlights how reaching the Indian Ocean was viewed as a literal, historic destiny for Russia. If we rewind to the 19th century, right in the middle of the original Great Game, the British Empire actively and repeatedly blocked Russian expansion into places like Afghanistan and Iran just to protect its own maritime dominance. So for Russia, successfully building a train line directly to the Indian Ocean today, that would be the ultimate culmination of a historic destiny they were flat out denied centuries ago.
So we have all this sweeping, dramatic history. But, history alone doesn't fund massive international railway megaprojects, right? So we have to ask ourselves, why is reaching the Indian Ocean an absolute, undeniable geopolitical necessity for Russia right now? Let's transition from the drama of the past to the urgent, modern-day economic realities. Let's look at the actual math driving this intense quest.
The first number that really puts this whole thing into perspective is 40 to 50%. That is the staggering share of all global trade that is handled by the Indian Ocean today. Nearly half of the world's commerce is floating through these waters right now. Any global superpower, or really any nation aspiring to maintain heavy geopolitical influence, desperately needs direct, unfettered access to a body of water that literally controls half of the global economy.
But wait, it gets even more specific and honestly even more crucial for Moscow. 70%. That is the share of the entire world's global oil trade that passes through the Indian Ocean. Think about that for a second. For a massive oil exporter like Russia, missing out on direct access to the ocean that facilitates 70% of the world's oil trade, that is a massive strategic bottleneck. They simply cannot afford to be locked out of this maritime superhighway.
Now, you might be wondering, doesn't Russia already have a massive port in the east, like Vladivostok? Well, they do. But consider this population density breakdown. And this brilliantly illustrates the problem. Between 80 to 90% of Russia's population, along with its massive industrial hubs like Moscow and St. Petersburg, are located entirely in Western Russia. Only a tiny fraction of the population lives in the east. So Vladivostok is simply way too far away from the economic heart of the country to solve their immediate export needs to the global south.
Which brings us right to the present day and what we can call the modern dilemma. If those eastern ports are just too far from the population centers, Russia has to rely on maritime routes that connect directly to its western cities. But right now, those traditional oceanic routes are fundamentally failing. Russia is facing some severe supply chain and security bottlenecks that are literally forcing them to look for alternative solutions.
If we look at the two existing options for cargo ships trying to reach Western Russia from the Indian Ocean, the problem becomes pretty obvious. First, you have the Bab el-Mandeb route. Right now, that is highly unsecured due to Houthi rebel attacks on cargo ships, which makes this passage a massive security risk. Okay, so what if ships just avoid that and take the Strait of Malacca route instead? Well, then the journey becomes impractically long. A ship would have to cross the South China Sea, navigate all the way up through the Bering Strait, just to eventually route that cargo back toward Moscow. Neither route is safe and neither is efficient.
So, what do you do when the oceans fail you? You bypass them entirely. This is exactly why the Russian deputy prime minister recently proposed this highly ambitious land-based megaproject, a direct railway link stretching all the way from Moscow to India. This proposal seeks to cut out those dangerous maritime choke points completely, creating a direct, overland economic artery.
Let's actually trace how this builds out geographically, step by step. The journey starts in Russia, moving via the Caspian Sea down into Turkmenistan. From there, the cargo would travel overland through Iran, cross into Afghanistan, route down through Pakistan, and finally arrive in India. Now, it's important to note that this exact continuous route is distinct from the existing Chabhar port plans or the North-South Transport Corridor. It's a massive, multi-nation overland undertaking.
Now, if you follow geopolitical discussions online, you've probably seen some alternative theories floating around. And it really begs the question, why not just build a direct route that bypasses the complexities of Iran and Pakistan entirely? Why not just draw a straight line right through Central Asia, maybe through Tajikistan, straight into India?
Well, while that might be theoretically ideal for a country like India to bypass certain neighbors, we have to look at the impartial reality on the ground. The challenges of an alternative Tajikistan route are immense. First off, it requires building heavy railway infrastructure through highly mountainous, incredibly difficult terrain. Second, geographically, it would have to pass through Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, or POK. So until those deeply entrenched territorial disputes are fully resolved sometime in the future, this direct route remains a logistical and geopolitical impossibility for right now.
So, assuming the proposed multi-nation route goes forward instead, the economic impact would be absolutely staggering. We're talking about a true game-changing infrastructure project. For Russia, it means the ability to seamlessly and directly export vast quantities of oil overland. For India, it opens up a direct, hyper-efficient line for receiving crucial resources, including heavy defense equipment straight from Russian manufacturing hubs, without having to rely on vulnerable cargo ships at all. But we have to objectively lay out the elephant in the room here. This isn't just about laying down some track. There are massive geopolitical and security roadblocks, particularly for India. If this train runs through the proposed route, India would have to pay transit fees to Pakistan. There are also severe security and terrorism risks to any cargo passing through that region. Furthermore, this would almost certainly face fierce diplomatic opposition from the US and the UK. Western powers would push back hard against a project that essentially hands Russia a belated victory in that historic, great game we talked about earlier.
So the absolutely crucial point is, what happens next? Look, with global trade choke points becoming more problematic by the day, countries are actively looking for safe overland trade passages. You're going to want to keep your eyes on the upcoming 2026 BRICS Summit, which is being hosted in India. With leaders like Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping attending, it is highly likely that new, concrete connectivity proposals regarding this exact railway will be put on the table. The push to realize this century-old dream is imminent.
Which leaves us with a really fascinating crossroads to consider. We've seen the historical ambition, the staggering trade numbers, and the modern maritime failures that are driving this megaproject. But we've also seen the massive geopolitical hurdles. So what do you think? Can a land-based train bypassing traditional ocean ports fundamentally reshape global trade for the next century? Or are the regional security and diplomatic risks simply too high for this historic dream to ever become a reality? Think about it, and definitely keep watching this space as the map of global trade potentially gets completely redrawn.